tonight. This is wonderful. I love that there's so many people here. I really appreciate that. I definitely want to thank the library for being willing to host the event and all the challenges I create, like asking if I need a microphone at the last minute, and they figure it out and hook up a microphone and speaker, and then I say, hey, I'll see if I can do it without it too. So really appreciate that. They've been very, very supportive in trying to help us be able to share information with people. I have Andrea over here, who is my amazing helper within my office, and she's going to keep notes when we have questions, which at the end, you're more than welcome to ask questions. So we'll keep those and we'll share them so that way other people have that information as well. You can come on in. And then my plan is to go through a presentation, share a bunch of information, and then have an opportunity for you to ask questions. I will be happy to answer questions. I imagine there are some things I probably won't be able to completely answer, but I will do my best to answer the questions that are asked. And then I also wanted to make sure everyone knows that we will have additional meetings coming up, as this is a significant process for the district, and I believe we're setting up 2 meetings for December, 2 in January and 2 in February. So like every other week, we're going to have meetings to share information and make sure that we're as transparent as possible through this process. So that's kind of the overarching beginning of that. So I want to go through a bunch of different things, and I have a presentation. The library is also recording me, which is why I have the cool microphone on, and we're going to share this publicly afterwards. We're not live sharing anything because we want people to come, and I really do want people to ask questions, which is part of the value of people coming to the event. So we want to talk about budget reduction. That's our challenge that is before us. As we've gone into the school year, I'm going to talk about school finances a little bit, how that's figured out within a district, but we are struck with some challenges. One, initially this year for the current year that we're in, we had a deficit that we had to correct, and we had to do that immediately. The board last night just approved the recommendations for reductions that I gave them, which ultimately ended up around $350,000 for this current year. Upcoming, we have a budget reduction for the next school year that we have to fix, which is, I'm using the rough number of 3 million. It's closer to 2.8 million, but that number has changed recently due to some local decisions that were made at the county level. So I want to use the 3 million number, so we're having a target of what our reductions are. The big keys that I think are really valuable as you look through this process, and I'm going to give a lot of information tonight, so you're aware of that. But first of all, every dollar that we save, it protects student programs, and that's incredibly important. The value of Madison schools is the programs we offer kids, it's our staff, it's our kids, it's our family, it's the community. We have an incredible amount of good things within Madison, and we need to make sure that we don't lose the good part of what we have. The decisions that we have to make, they're not just short term. The decisions I told you just a moment ago that we had to save immediately, those were very short-term solutions that we had to make immediately, but we have to make very long-term financial decisions to make sure that we're stabilizing, because when you look at our forecast over the next few years, we have that roughly $3 million deficit, and then it becomes a $6 million the year after, and then it becomes a $9 million the year after. It just keeps increasing. And that's why if you make reductions earlier, it also works that way throughout. So if you make the reductions initially, if we reduce the 3 million now, it reduces the 6 million the year after, then the 9 million the year after. It's why it's incredibly important to make the decisions earlier and not later, and make sure that they're long-term solutions. As I've already said, we're really committed to preserving the quality that we have within the district. We have a lot of high quality learning. We want to make sure we protect that. And then we want to make sure that we're very transparent through the process. I think that part is really important. And that's something we're going to stay committed to, is making sure that we're sharing information. It's why we're having these types of meetings. It's why I'm doing Facebook updates. It's why I've met with staff. It's why we'll continue to do that through this process, because I think it's really valuable for everyone to know, but then for you to also have an opportunity to provide thought and opinions and perspectives. So we can consider that as well. A little bit about why we are where we are. So, as I talked about already, there's a $3 million deficit that is of our $30 million budget. We have roughly a $30 million budget in the district. We have to reduce $3 million, which is roughly 10%, prior to the next school year. So that means essentially between the beginning of the new year and prior to August, we have to reduce that $3 million. The reductions have to be approved by the board prior to the February time period. We had an update from the state fiscal office last night at the board meeting, and they're actually pushing the district to make the decision in December. I just wrote an appeal to them and requested that they give us to February, so we can have some more time to be able to have transparency through this. Everybody hear me still okay? Okay. I'm going to hold off for now. But those reductions have to be approved right now by February. It might be a little bit earlier than that based on what the state requires, but we have to make those decisions, and we want to make sure, obviously, we're being transparent and collaborative through this. Why do we have a deficit? Which I think is a really good question. There's a number of reasons why this has come. Madison has worked really hard over the years to be really attentive to financing and making decisions year by year to make sure that we have a balanced budget. There were some changes that happened during the summertime that really impacted our finances. We rely heavily on state financing, on state funding for the district. And that state funding formula was changed over the summer in the recent legislature, where they did not fund us at the same rate that they had previously. So that was a significant hurt to our finances. Funding at the state level is completely tied to enrollment. Our enrollment through the district has declined. It's declined for over 20 years in reality, but there's been a steady decline for 10 years. And that decline impacts our state funding, which then impacts our amount of money we have in the district to provide the programs and all that we do through the district. That declining enrollment is a key component to why the state funding has been impacted too. So I want to make sure people understand that enrollment has declined, and that's a key factor. It's a root cause of that. One of the examples I keep giving people is, if you look at our high school classes, our grade levels at high school, 12th grade, 11th, 10th, 9th, we're around 200 kids on average through those grade levels. But if you look at K1 and 2, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, those grade levels tend to be at 168 to 172. Those grade levels become the normal as they go on. There's a decline in enrollment because there's a decline in births in the community. And that's not just Madison, that's Lake County. From talking to other superintendents around, that's very, very common of what has occurred. And that's actually common through the state of Ohio. That's not unusual throughout the state. But it's really important to know that enrollment is tied to your state funding, which having a declining enrollment then impacts that funding that you get. Additionally, the county voted to give property tax give back to community members. That was a countywide decision. That impacts us by about $400,000 every year. I completely understand that there's a issue and a concern by many, many people about property taxes. I totally get it. I understand why the county commissioners decided that. But I also want people to be aware that that is impactful to not just school districts, but also police, fire, township, parks, the libraries, all the entities that property taxes fund, that impacts all of them. But it definitely impacted our district as well. And that was a decision that was made. It was communicated to us a couple of days before the decision was made, and then we had to quickly make that adjustment. And then finally, there's rising operating costs, which I know every community member has that same experience. The electric bills, the heating bills, health insurance bills, all those things continue to go up. And that is a unique challenge that, shouldn't say unique, it's a common challenge to schools, but to everybody, that we're all experiencing that. How do school budgets work? I think that's a really interesting idea because I've tried to learn a lot about school budgets in my career in education. And I think sometimes we think that they're very stagnant, and they're actually not. They're very fluid. Kids come into the district every day. Our enrollment changes because kids come into the district. It might be kids that have moved into the district. It might be kids who open a roll to a community district. They decide they don't want to go there anymore, and they come to us. And we develop our staffing model though in the summertime for what our anticipated enrollment is. But then when there are changes, that creates a lot of challenges we have to make sure that we're accustomed to and able to deal with. So the fluidity of the budget is very challenging. That, and I'm not trying to continue to harp on, but that county decision to change our financing that quickly as they did, that was really significant because we had the funding set up for the year. We anticipated the finances we were going to get. They changed it in the moment. We then had to change as well, which meant we had to reduce some of the things we were doing to make up for that lost money. That's part of that challenge of how budgets work within schools. We allocate funds to staffing, transportation, operations, and of course our programs. And that's how we look at what are the opportunities we're going to provide. We align funding to it, which a lot of that is tied to staffing, which is obviously our largest expense within the district. And then we create that revenue stream combined to the programs and how we provide that. When revenue changes during the year, it has a really significant impact, and then we have to make those adjustments to how we planned on spending the money. And then, of course, there are unexpected expenses that come up, much like I talked about. We have a few older buildings, so if a building has a roof issue, we have to provide some immediate resolution to that, then we have to do that. That's an unplanned expense that we might have that has to come up and we have to deal with. And as I was saying, our kids are not stagnant. They flow in and out of the district. Enrollment throughout every school district, it changes continually, and that's something you have to be attentive to. Some of our goals and purpose as we go through this process, one is while we're looking at reducing spending, we want to make sure that we protect learning, safety, and the opportunities we provide the kids. Our kids have a lot of opportunities in the district, whether it's after school programs or within the classroom or going to field trips. There's a lot of good opportunities. We want to make sure that we protect both learning and safety and also those opportunities they have. We want to limit the reductions that we create with staff members as much as possible. There will be absolute reductions to staff. It's going to happen through the process. We want to limit that as much as we're possible to do so, because we also know that our staff are really important to the district. We are fortunate. We have great staff members within Madison, and they do a lot for our kids. I tell people this all the time when I ask friends I've had for a long time and they ask me about Madison. This thing I say every single time at the very beginning is, it is a different place. People work together to figure out solutions unlike I have seen before. And it doesn't matter who it is or what their position is, they work together to figure it out, which is not normal in every district. And it's something that I think that Madison should be very proud of. It's the culture here. I actually notice it in the community too. It's not just unique to the district. It's a community climate. It's a culture that's been created. And I think all of you should be very proud because you're part of that creation. We have 5 commitments we're looking at. So protecting learning and safety, making sure that we communicate very openly, making sure that we engage staff, families, and community, making sure we maintain our academic strength, and then making sure we use taxpayer dollars responsibly, which is part of that necessity to reduce our expenses. We have a 6-phase process that we're looking at through this, and as we identified our financial issue, we started to develop this plan, really looking at those commitments that we just talked about and how do we ensure that through a process. So the process is going to be very transparent and it was very carefully determined. It's started already, and it's going to go through June, because even as we make the changes that we have to make and the board has to approve, we have to keep monitoring that process and making sure that we make adjustments as we go. So I'm going to talk about the phases a little bit. Phase 1 and 2. So phase 1, we're sharing a full financial picture, which I've done online. I've showed our financial forecast. I've shown the deficit. Talked about it a little bit tonight as well. And then we're going to talk about the process that we're using, because I think that's important for people to understand. Phase 2 is then getting ideas from people. We've already done that. Our staff have filled out a form. I would tell you we've now gotten over 150 different ideas from staff members. We're going to share a form shortly after this meeting with the community and families for you to give us ideas as well. Every idea we look at, and we look at who's impacted, what's the financial savings, is it sustainable, and does it impact the reduction that we need to make? So I would encourage people, share ideas. We're happy to look at them. We're happy to explore them. I think that many of the ideas we've already gotten are really, really good ideas, and they're good things to look at. And a point that we've continued to make is no idea is too big or too small to explore. We've really looked at everything we can down to very small amounts of money to save, but those little amounts of money add up. So we're looking at every opportunity of how we can do that and how we can make good decisions. Phase 3, which is that January to February timeframe, is when the board will review the data and the recommendations that I'll present to the board for a vote on those recommendations of reductions. Phase 4, we'll continue to share those recommendations publicly, gather feedback. I have said this many times, when you have to reduce 10% of your budget, nothing that I recommend is going to be good. It's going to be hard stuff. It's going to be difficult. It's going to hurt in different ways. But I believe it's important that we're honest, we're upfront about it, we share it, and then we get your feedback on it too and listen to it. But I fully appreciate that kind of reduction in 1 year is a lot, and it's going to be very challenging for us all to work through that. Phase 5 is then implementing the reductions and clearly communicating about those reductions, and continuing with the presentations, the meetings, the conversations, and listening to feedback. Phase 6 then really is the throughout the entire process, but then also into the next school year and into the school year after. And it's making sure we monitor what the savings were, we track the impact, and we report the progress. Because again, I think it's really important that everyone understands what we've done and how it's made this impact and how we continue forward. And much like I was saying earlier, when you look at our enrollment, you look at the challenges that are ahead, and considering that it's a 10% reduction, every year we have to keep then being attentive. We cut the 10%, we reduce by 10, and that's going to get us in a very positive place. It's not a perfect place, but it's a positive place financially. And then every year you have to keep being very attentive to the finances and making decisions every single year, so we don't get back to this place that we have a large reduction we have to make. Minor adjustments year over year can be made. Bigger reductions like this are much harder to make. Collaboration with staff, I talked about a little bit. So we have, I presented to all staff members a couple weeks ago now, so we could talk about what these challenges are. Today I met with the teachers union leaders. We have a joint budget reduction team, which is made up of both our classified union members and our certified union members. We're meeting on Tuesdays to talk about this process, the plan, the challenges, and we'll continue to do that because it is really important to involve our staff, and staff are going to be impacted, and we want to be very cognizant, empathetic of that process with them, and really make sure that they are well informed. We're going to continue to engage employees regularly to make sure that our decisions are practical, that we can do them, and then that we have a team of those leaders that I just identified that are meeting to work through the process. And then listening to every department. We have a number of different meetings. We have a finance meeting that meets every Thursday to look at our finances or review them weekly to make sure that we're attentive to the decisions we're making and making adjustments where we need to. And we are listening to different departments. So we had child nutrition meet with us a week ago to talk about some different options there and to look at those. And every single department is really valuable through this process. The idea submission form, which I'm showing you in 1 second, but this will be sent out so that way you can share ideas. I truly encourage people to submit ideas so we can consider them, we can think about them, we can look at what those solutions are. I look forward to them from either staff or students, families, community members, anyone, for them to put forth ideas that we can look for, and the creative ideas that you have, I think, would be wonderful for us to explore. And then this is what the form will be like. We created it as a form so that way we could capture them, and then we could add notes to it and track everything we do. That's the link. Andrea is going to share it out on Facebook. We have a method of sharing it out. We're going to put it on Infinite Campus, the families first, and then social media, website, and so forth. The opportunities to engage, and this is what you guys are doing tonight. And seriously, I appreciate everyone coming out tonight. I know we scheduled it, and I think we scheduled it on a night that wasn't perfectly convenient because there's a middle school event, and I know there's a million different things that everybody has going on. I appreciate you giving up time to be here. But it is valuable for the community and families and staff to be involved in this. It is not a singular decision. It is a impactful decision that we have to make for the district, but also the community, and we want to hear from people. There are going to be future forums, I believe I mentioned earlier, but essentially every other week we're going to have different forums. Some will be here, some will be at the middle school, some at the high school, to give people an opportunity. I want to share as much as we can. I want to hear from people, and we'll continue to share stuff on Facebook as well, because I know everybody can't attend. We will keep questions that people ask so we can share those publicly. We will also continue to do Facebook updates to share information as well. Some things we've already done, which I mentioned, this year from October to November, in a very short time period, we reduced $349,000. That was primarily done through just efficiencies that we were able to make. There are some grants that we have. We were able to better utilize those to reduce the general fund of the district. We were able to reduce some of our legal and consulting costs. We were able to lower some of our insurance rates that we have. And then we were able to postpone some non-essential programs. And we worked really, really hard to minimize the impact on classrooms wherever possible. There were no staff members eliminated or changed in these decisions. They were made without having a direct impact in that way. And then the key messages, which I already kind of went over, which I believe are very valuable as we go through this, to make sure that we're collaborative, we're transparent, that we're working together, and that other point that I made a couple of times, making those decisions earlier is able to replicate over time. And it's something that we can eliminate the $9 million deficit in year 3 by doing the $3 million deficit this year and making sure it's sustainable. Give me 1 second. So I've had a cold, and I'm going to totally screw up everything by moving around, or just yell. If you could yell. I can't hear. Okay. No, right now our budget is basically $3 million. What the issue is at next year we're going to be at 33 million in expenses, but our revenue is 30. We have to get back there. So that means we have to reduce the expenses. Does that make sense? If you make decisions that, so I'm going to give you a for example to help make this a little more concrete. If you make a reduction, let's say to eliminate a staff member who has been here, that staff member within our budget is here this year and next year and the year after and the year after. If you eliminate that position this year, it's also eliminated next year, but it's no longer, I'm just using a number, it's no longer 50,000 this year, it's 50,000 this year, but it's 150 next year. It's 100 next year, it's 150. Does that make sense? If you make sustainable reductions year over year and don't just bring it all back. Yes. Good. That was a perfect question. Just to close real quick, and then we'll get the other questions too. I really do thank all of you for being here. I thank you for being part of this and involved in the conversation. I absolutely know this is really hard. I absolutely know that none of us want to experience this. This is not something that anybody looks forward to doing, but it is the reality of where we are, and it's the difficult decisions we have to make. It's important, though, for people to know. It's important for us to be transparent. It's important for you to have a voice in it and to share. It doesn't mean that we can do everything that everyone recommends, but there's value in listening to what your thoughts are and then exploring them. You've overcome challenges. We've had budget challenges in Madison year over year, and corrections have been made. This correction's just bigger. And it is, as I was describing to someone the other day, we're not unique. we're working with the state of Ohio. They're working with 44 other school districts in the state of Ohio that have financial challenges too. So it's not unique to us, but for us, it's unique and it hurts. And that's part of that importance of being empathetic. Something I continually encourage people, don't spread rumors. I keep hearing about the things that we're doing, and I keep expressing to people, nobody knows anything that we're doing because we have not decided what we're doing. I told you earlier, we've gotten hundreds of ideas and we've looked at every one of them. And somebody could say, you're doing all of those. You could absolutely say that we're doing all 200 ideas that we've been given. We're not, but somebody could say it. And that would then create a rumor of all these things we're doing. And the rumors are hurtful. I can't overly stress the hurt that it causes, not just to the staff, but also to the community, to our families, to our kids. And I think it's really important to don't spread what you think it's going to be or what you've heard it's going to be until it's said what it's going to be. And I'm telling you, we will tell you what it's going to be. I have to make the recommendation to the board. We are capturing ideas, we are looking at them, we are exploring them. And it's 10%. That is a lot for a district to do. I am being as forthright as I possibly can that it's going to hurt. 10% is a lot of money for a district to reduce in 1 year. And they're going to be big things. I don't have the answer of what all those things are, but I'm asking that give us the time to work through it, but give us your ideas. Be part of the conversation. And in January, it's going to become very clear of what our decisions and recommendations that I'm going to present to the board, because we have a time period that we have to make sure we're meeting. And then make sure you're following the updates. If somebody asks me, I'm going to talk to them. This isn't a statement of pride in any way. I'm the source. If you have a question, ask me. I'm happy to answer questions. There are some things I can't answer. I don't want people creating answers, though. That's my concern, because it creates hurt. It creates anger. It creates worry. I know I've created worry already within our district with our staff members. I absolutely know that. I know I'm creating worry right now as I talk to all of you. But our belief is that we need to be transparent. We need to be honest with people. We need to share information. And then as we go through the process, the phases I've laid out, we're going to continue to do that. And it's why if you have a question, I'm happy to answer it, which, by the way, the Q&A starts right now. That was really good how I did that. Okay, this nice gentleman was really fast. Yes. Yes, I have to repeat them, so you have to go one at a time. So the question was, the state is talking about the inside millage decisions that, yes. Inside millage is one of the ways that schools get funded. Yes, it could hurt us. I would tell you that our biggest area of hurt would be the state formula of how they fund us. We are funded at a pretty strong rate by the state as opposed to local taxes. So would the inside millage hurt? Yes, but I would tell you that that would be one of those minor adjustments. It would not be something where we're at right now. Yes. Yeah, that was a really good question. So, man, this is good. This is like school financing and enrollment 101 here. This I like it. So, um, the state funds districts based on the number of kids they have. The federal government gives us a little bit of money, and that's more based on uniquenesses with students. The state funding, though, is figured daily, and they adjust it continually. So I was talking about our enrollment changes consistently. So if we have 100 kids today, the state funds the 100 kids today. If tomorrow, if Andrea leaves and goes to an online school, which by the way, I think online schools are awful, and I am publicly saying that I don't agree with online schools. I understand why some people make the decision. You got to make the choice that's right for you and for your child. I just don't like online schools. So if Andrea leaves, we have 99 kids. We get funded at 99 tomorrow. And it keeps making that adjustment. Back in the day, it did not do that. It did it like quarterly, and there were dates that you had to do it. You know, with computers, they've created it now that you're constantly reporting that. There's a thing called EMIS data, which is really, really important for a district. And that is actually what the state uses to figure all that out. We're actually working really hard to make sure our data that we provide to the state is really accurate to make sure it's done properly, which I believe will help us as we perfect that a little bit more. But I would also tell you, the question was around enrollment and the kids that come in and the kids that leave the districts. I didn't say that at the beginning. We have more kids open enrolled to Madison that then open enroll out of Madison. We do not have a significant number of kids that go to private schools or charter schools or community schools. The larger amount of kids that are not in the district that are district kids are homeschooled. That's the bigger number. But when you put all those together, the kids that are coming in, the kids that are going out, it is not a substantial number either direction. It balances pretty close. It's not perfect, but it's pretty close. Those are two really good questions. Okay, question here. Yes. No, and I don't want that to be confused at all. I would tell you that it's why, can you hear me now? I'm sorry. The question was, she's supposed to remind me, Bob. Oh, I'm sorry. The question was, we made reductions based on efficiencies. Am I now saying that the reductions we have to make are all staff? Is that fair? Okay. No, the answer is not that all the reductions we have to make are staff. What I would tell you is that we need to look really carefully at how our enrollment has changed over the years. How do we make decisions that help to it's a term that's used a lot, right size the school district to the number of kids we have now. We're just not as big as we used to be. And we're not going to be. The trend of enrollment is the trend of enrollment, and a 20-year trend tells you it's going to keep being that. So we've got to make that. Is it all staffing? Not at all. We're trying to make it less staffing than it has to be. An easy answer, and I would tell you that not begrudging the state, but the state would tell you you have to make up $30 million. Or $3 million. You need to cut the number of staff that equal $3 million. We have very deliberately, with the board, with our teams, we have very specifically identified that's not the answer for Madison. We don't have some abundance of staff members. Our classes are pretty big. We don't have some huge amount of administrators. We don't have any of that overage of staffing that we can easily do that. We've got to, and our staff are the really valuable part of this district. You don't want to cut the value. Is there going to be staff reduction? Yes. We don't want it to be the predominant. We don't want it to be the only thing. Okay? But it will be some. So the district, thank you. I'm really bad at that, apparently. The question was, how do we operate on a budget with the school, and if we're spending at a deficit, how do we do that? Essentially? Okay. So school districts, they're never at like a zero balance at the end of the year. Like school districts in a perfect world, they always want to have money they're carrying over from one year to the next. So one of the challenges we've had, we had carryover funds for a number of years, but then we started deficit spending. We were spending into that money we were carrying over. That is okay to do for 1 year. It's not okay to do year over year over year, because you will eliminate that overage and now you'll be at the negative. We were at the negative. We reduced that 349,000, which brought us back to a positive. At the end of the year right now, we're projected to be at a positive of like $70,490. That is not what a school district wants. You ideally would like to have an overage that's about 5% of your budget. So ideally, it would be perfect to have an overage of about 1.5 million for a district with our budget. But because it's been at a deficit spending for a number of years, we've eroded the carryover. Now we're at that threshold of, when you look at the end of this year, we're going to have 70,000. When you look at next year, we're going to be minus almost $3 million. The state will not allow you to do that. They will not let you to project negative balances. You have to have that corrected, which is why we're at the place of, we need to make the reductions. Does that answer? Okay. Other questions? I'm sorry, let me go back to the beginning because I can't keep seeing the words. Yes. Sure. Yeah. The question was, can we, fourth time lucky. The question was, can we share financial information of the district so that way you can have informed ideas to us? Yes. I looked over at Andrea because she's going to make a note, and I will happily share that. We can share documents. They're public documents. Like, nothing is private. I will tell you, every school, everywhere, we're a people business. What do we produce? We don't produce widgets. We produce strong young men and women that go out in the community and do great things. That's the production of a good school district. That's what we produce. How do we do that? Primarily with people. So 80% of our expenditures, 80% of what we spend is on staff. And that's not abnormal. That's very, very normal for a school district. That's part of why, what I was telling you earlier, the state's going to say, what's your biggest expense? Cut that. That's why that becomes the easy answer. That's why we know for Madison that's not the answer. That can't be the singular answer. But yes, we absolutely can. We can share that with you, so that way you can have some more information. I think that's a good idea. The question was, can we break down like where, like precisely where we spend it? We're gonna have to make buckets, I think, to be able to share it. It'll probably be a little bit broader. I'll have to work with the finance office to see how we can break it down, but we can do that. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, the question was if we reduce by the required amount this year, but then our enrollment keeps declining, are there going to have to be continual reductions? Yes, there would be. But it's part of why I'm telling you, one, the reductions this year it's a big number. And we need to get to a positive place, which kind of going back to that question about carryover funds. To get to a positive place, and then every year being very strategic on decisions that we make and looking at enrollment, looking at our costs, looking at those very finite details, which is why it's really important that we have a Thursday meeting to look at finances every single week. It's painful. None of us enjoy doing it, but it's valuable. It's really valuable when you look at your finances every week and look at how are we spending money and can we make decisions that are different. I'll give you an example. So recently I emailed staff and asked about color copies because color copies cost about 10 times as much as a black and white copy. A school district produces a lot of copies. You know, you make copies for kids to do work. I mean, it's not a shocker. We make programs, flyers, all kinds of things in paper. In a school year, we spend close to $30,000 on color copies. And the question then we got to was, how much could we reduce it immediately to save money? So that's why we sent it out to staff and said, we're looking at doing this. Please provide feedback so we can make a recommendation. Because the rest of the year, we believe we can save about $12,000 just by reducing, not fully eliminating, but reducing color copies. But again, those are hard decisions. You have to think through them. You have to really consider them, because if anyone went to the middle school play, which was wonderful, by the way, I hope you got to see, there were color programs that were given out. We made the decision we weren't cutting that. Like, we thought it was valuable for those to be color copies. When kids get awards, we're not going to make those black and white. They should be color. It's special. But there are other things we do that we can eliminate color copies. Okay? That's a practical example. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I think we could take it and generalize them. I think a little bit will be putting them in buckets because some of them get very, very narrowed down, but I think just more broadly, I think is a really good. Looking at Andrea again. She's so excited to be here. But yeah, I think that's a good idea. So that way, kind of going back to the question, I'm sorry, the question was, will we provide information on what recommendations have already been sent in, so that way you don't send in the same thing if you know that somebody else did. And we will. We'll provide that because we're going to have a Q&A, but we'll provide that too of examples that have been, or a list of things that have been, and kind of put them in buckets because some of them get very, very specific. It's a good idea. Yes. That was a really good question. The question was, why was the decision made not to put a levy on the November ballot, right? Okay, so I would say once we were informed of what this issue was, which by the state and by looking at our finances, that was really October. And so our ability to do that had already passed. You have to put a levy on the ballot months ahead of time, and the board has to have, I believe it's 2 votes on that to do it. So we were past that. I would tell all of you personally, this is my personal perspective. I know that this is a very challenging time for all people financially. I know that there is a significant movement through the state of Ohio to abolish property taxes. I know that when you look at levies that are passed for new dollars, it's a very low passage rate. If we were going to put a levy on the ballot to make up the amount of money we need to make up, it would be over 10 mils, which that is a automatic failure in the state of Ohio. 10 mil levies never pass. So I would not recommend that. Could you do something different? You could. I don't believe it is the right time to try to pass a levy. And I would also tell you, as we've worked together as a team and as a board, we believe it's very important that we are stewards of taxpayers' dollars. And we need to make some adjustments based on when you look at our projection of enrollment over time, there are adjustments we have to make. And I don't think that it is, this is my personal opinion. I don't want to reiterate that again. I don't believe that it is the right time for us to ask the community to pass a levy when there are difficult decisions we have to make as a district to correct where we are. Is that a future conversation? Yes, I do believe that's a future conversation. But I think that needs to be considered over time. You know, I don't be confused that I'm suggesting in any way that we soon ask for a levy. I am not personally suggesting that at all. I think that homeowners and those that pay real estate property tax, they are wore out. And I think that that's a challenge that we need to let work through the state of Ohio, and then we need to come back as a community and have the conversation. But that's a conversation to lead to a group decision, I think. So did I answer you? Okay. hmm It's a good question. Yeah, good question. The question was property tax reevaluation, and then the taxes went up. And how does that help a school district? So this is a unique thing that I know I didn't understand for a long time. When we pass a levy, our funds, the amount of money we draw from that levy is set at that time. It does not go up for inflation. It does not go up when property is reevaluated. What we get is what we get based on when the levy was passed. So we don't see those increases like that. And it's part of, again, where, you know, property tax, I think some people think that property taxes all go to the school. They do not. And I looked at this recently, and I'm going to tell you this number, and I'm not telling you it's 100% right because I didn't look at it today, but I believe we get roughly 47% of property taxes in the district we get. The other gets dispersed to all those other groups I said, fire, police, library, parks, all those different, a number of organizations. So our amount is very small, but again, when you pass a levy, the amount that is raised is frozen at that point. We don't see the increases. Where we will see increases is if a home development comes in and builds a bunch of new houses, we see that new money because that's a new property. But we don't see it just from the inflation or the reevaluation. Okay? So no, it's not going to help us at all. Yes. Yes. The question was about open enrollment and are the reductions going to have any impact in open enrollment in the district? So we started having a end of open enrollment time period this year, and that's going to exist year over year. So if right now today, if a student from any other district said they wanted to come to Madison, if Perry student wanted to come to Madison, first of all, I'd say no because you're from Perry. I'm just joking. I'm just joking. But open enrollment's closed right now. We're not taking more kids in open enrollment. Open enrollment is a really interesting thing because, as I was saying before, we get state funding for kids who are open enrolled in, but we only get state funding. The money that is raised in property taxes that goes to that school district still goes to that school district. It doesn't follow the student in any way. So that's one important part. So we only get part of it. I was explaining this to a staff member today. You want to be careful when you're taking in open enrollment. And I had experience in another district and they took tons of open enrollment to the point where they were hiring staff for the kids that were open enrolling. It's a horrible idea because you're only getting a little bit less than half of the funding for that student, which is the state funding for that open enrolled student into your district. What you really want to do is look every year, grade by grade, and look at how many kids do you have at a grade level, how many seats do we have available, and then save a couple of seats because kids might come into the community just naturally, they move in. You have to have, those kids have to go to your school district. But if you have 5 open seats, I would tell you 3 of those seats you could take by open enrollment, but you should look year by year, grade by grade to make that decision. Because otherwise you're going to have more kids than you have seats, and then you're going to have a requirement of you have to hire another staff member, but the funding does not match up with the open enrollment student. Does that make sense? It's a little complicated. So how will it be impacted? If kids are open enrolled into this district right now, they're able to stay open enrolled into this district. We're not kicking kids out like that. And if you live in Madison and you move to another district and you want your child to stay here, you can stay. That's a continuity open enrollment. You can absolutely stay. We know that kids do better with continuity. They do better if they stay where they are. Kids moving schools is a challenging thing. So that won't be impacted. But what will be impacted is every year we will look very specifically at new open enrollment into the district and make sure that we are financially responsible in making those decisions. Does that answer? Okay. Yeah, the question was like intra open enrollment between South and North, and will that impact that? I mean, I would tell you that it's something that we have to be attentive to, but again, it would be the same thing. The continuity part of it is going to override the other part of just moving kids around. moving kids around is as an educator, that's a challenging concept to me. So we want to enable kids to have continuity as much as possible. It's something we would always look at. I would say in the world of chances, it's a low chance because that's going to violate an educator principle I think most educators have. Yes. Yeah, it's essentially you can say a year behind. Yeah, it's not like immediate. The question was if we pass a levy, when do the funds come in? It's basically the easy answer to that is it's basically a year from that point. That that's a really good question is how far behind are we on unpaid property taxes like foreclosures and such? I'll have to look to get the precise number. I know when the treasurer and I looked, it was not a significant figure. Like it wasn't something of concern, but I can look. Andrea is going to make a note so we can look that up. Okay. The question was, I said the question, didn't I? Okay. Thanks. Sorry. Other questions? Yes. Will you ask your first question again? Because I wrote down the second one, but the first one. Oh, yeah. Perfect. Thank you. So the question was, I was talking earlier about how the state wants us to make the decision by December 21st about our reductions for the next school year. And when do I expect to hear back from the state? I expect pretty quickly to hear back. I believe that my argument and approach was right, and which quite honestly, this was part of the rationale. I believe that we need more time to enable communication, collaboration, conversation about it. So I believe pretty quickly we'll hear back from them. I feel optimistic that they're going to give us time. I don't know if it'll be February, it might be January, but I feel that. Um, and I think that's important. I think that's a really important thing. So that's the first question. The second question is, are we considering consolidating schools, right? That was it. I would tell you that there, I, the simple answer is we're considering everything. So is that something of consideration? Yes. There is literally nothing that we have not considered. We did a financial analysis on what if we went to 4-day schools, 4-day school weeks? What would that do? We looked at that. So I would tell you, we've looked at many, many options to consider, and we'll explore all of them. But ultimately, it's trying to look at how do we reach that target that we have, and how do we not just have one answer, but in all likelihood, there are a few different answers that we have to arrange to do that. And it's going to be challenging. It's going to be hard. I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to over dramatize that, but to cut 10% is hard. It's going to hurt. And I just want to be very clear and upfront about that. I didn't fully answer your question because I can't tell you like, hey, these are the answers because I don't have that yet. Yes. So the question was, what if we just don't do or don't accomplish it? What if we don't accomplish the reductions? The state does not just come in and take over. They will, right now we're on precaution, which is make your plan, make and have your reductions and do it, and you're going to be okay. That's precaution. It's a very generic way of saying it. If we don't meet the expectation, then they put us into fiscal caution. What that means is they are involved in working very directly with the district every single month, reviewing the purchases we're making, reviewing the expenditures we have. They're very, very involved. They're not taking over, but they're very involved in that process. And I would go back to, because I get some people would say, well, just let them do it. I think it's a really bad answer. I think that as a district, we want to be responsible for the decisions and we want to make the hard decisions because we're going to make the best decisions of those hard decisions. And I truly believe that. They're going to be hard, but I believe that we can make good, hard decisions. And then we want to be able to carry them out and to do it. And I go back to what I talked about a little bit when we were talking about the levy. I think it's part of our job as a school district as being responsible stewards of taxpayers. You've charged us to do something. You've given money to make sure we educate kids. We have a financial challenge ahead. We have to correct that. I think that's an important role that we as a district have. Did that answer you? It keeps getting worse. They keep getting more and more involved. They will have they'll have a commission essentially that works in tandem with the board. So it keeps getting worse. There's one district that's currently in that place. Part of the problem of getting in that place is once you get in that place, it is really hard to get out of it. And if this at some point, then the state would loan you the money. They expect you to pay it back, half of it this year and half of it next year. For a school district, you would have to make such incredible reductions to do that when you're already fine. It is a really bad payday loan place. That's what the state is. And computers are going to shut down in 5 minutes. Please take your work and so you don't. This is a good time for me to say. If you have questions, it doesn't matter if the building is. We'll hear a couple more announcements, but you guys can stay and keep asking your questions. Perfect. So it gets worse and worse, but the state really does become that really bad payday loan group that they give you the money, but they expect a lot in return, and they're really involved in your business. And again, I would go back to, one, we don't want to do that. Two, I believe it is our responsibility to make those decisions, and we're going to make the best decisions we can make for the kids, the district, communities, family. I think that's important. There was another question on this. Yes. So the question was, how are the reductions going to impact special education programs? Special education supports are required by law. So can there be reductions? Sure, but it's very thin. Like the reductions that can occur there are thin, are narrow. And we obviously, I haven't been here that long. Somebody asked earlier, and then I was trying to count on my fingers how many months. I think it was, wait a minute, July, August, September, October, November, 5 was the answer to that question. So I haven't been here that long, but I can tell you that we obviously care about every student regardless of their strength or challenge or anything. And I believe we do a really good job with kids who have different challenges and that they need extra support. I think we do a really good job, and I think we should be very proud of that. All kids are really important to us, and I see it when I go to every single building, the things they're doing with kids and the opportunities. the coffee shop at the high school with kids, I think, which is just really, really cool. And getting experience and more field experience like that, I think is wonderful. So could there be reductions? Yes, but they would have to be really small reductions because we're also required by law to make sure that we follow those too. So yeah, and that I was generalizing when she had mentioned special ed, looking at all kids with those different uniquenesses that need different supports or opportunities. Yeah, I'm. She had one more. I'm sorry. The question with Title One, could that be reduced? I would again go to, I don't know that there's anything that we're looking at and we're saying we're just absolutely reducing all. I would say that there are, I was using the analogy, it's kind of like a combination lock, and there's a whole bunch of pieces that you have to put together to get it to the right place. Focusing on those goals that I talked about to make sure we don't impact the really good part of who we are as a district. The question was, are there hard decisions regarding busing and what are they? I would go back to the answer I gave that question because I can't, I don't have the specifics of what those tumblers are. But is busing one of those things that we have to look at and consider? Yes, absolutely. We spend $1.3 million on transportation. It's a lot of money. And our budget, I told you already, is $30 million. It's a lot of money. Is busing really important? Yeah, it absolutely is. I know this, and I haven't been here this long. It's the biggest township in Ohio. It's a pretty big area. There aren't sidewalks everywhere. Our streets are busy. There's traffic. I know how people drive. So does it have to be considered? Yes. Everything has to be considered. Do we have to explore it? Is it one of the answers? I don't have that yet, but I think it's something we have to consider and explore. But also knowing that, much like I've said, I think a number of times, the recommendations that I make to the board, I know are going to be challenging, difficult, and unpopular. I absolutely know. But to make the reductions we have to make, there's going to be unpopular things we have to do. I didn't fully answer your question because I can't answer it yet. Okay. I think he was first, actually. Yeah, that's a good question. How do students who are absent affect our budget? We're still educating them, and part of students who are absent in our district is doing a really good job. We do a lot of follow-up to get kids to come back. One of the things I love is when kids are absent, they might get an auto call, but staff are calling families too, and they're saying, hey, Steve wasn't here today, we really miss him. Joni wasn't here today, we really missed her. Is she doing okay? Is she going to come back tomorrow? We're still working. So we still get funded for that student. If the student withdraws, then we don't get funded. But as long as they're enrolled, if they're absent, we still get funded because kids come back too. We have kids that miss a lot of school, but we have a lot of kids that just miss days here and there. So absenteeism in that way of days missing school, that does not affect school funding for districts at all. Yes. A really good question. You guys have asked good questions. The question was, how does CCP impact our budget and whether they're enrolled with a CCP course or not. If a student is a Madison student, we get funded by the state for that student. We get local taxes based on what the levy was passed at. So those are the two different parts. We get a small amount from the federal government based on students and primarily the different exceptionalities of students. With CCP, if a child goes to and takes a CCP course at a college, that college then bills us for that CCP course. So we essentially are paying them. So does that have a negative impact on us? Yes, it does. But we also know that kids having opportunities for college classes in high school, for going to career tech opportunities in high school, that's really valuable. We absolutely believe in that, and we want to support that. It does impact us because we're paying for the course, but I would tell you, one, by state law, you can't not do it. You have to do it. And two, we also believe there's value in that. So we lose some of the money because of that, but there's value to that. And then also the CCP course, the college is essentially educating them for that course. So that's why they're getting the money. They're the teacher in essence for that course. Does that make sense? Okay, that was good. Yes, sir. I've skipped you multiple times. I'm sorry. The question was, could I explain the criteria of how staff might be reduced, in particular with varying departments? I would say that when you look at staffing, it's really looking at our enrollment, our grade levels that we have. Are there places where we have more staff than are needed? I mean, essentially, that's where it comes down to. And it ties into our contracts we have with our unions as well, because we can only have so many students in a class, like with a teacher in a classroom. So that gets tied into it as well. I wouldn't tell you that there's an absolute simple answer to that. What I would tell you is what I would tell you is that the basis of that is looking at, you know, for the younger grade levels, we do staffing based on the number of kids within that grade. If I'm just using round numbers to make this really easy, if 30 is our capacity in a grade level and we have 180 kids at fifth grade, I'm simplifying this a lot, okay? 180 kids, 30 is our max number. 180 divided by 30, that means you need 5 teachers. 180, that would have been so much better if I did it my way. It'd be 6. You know, the worst part is math is my best subject. So it'd be 6 teachers that you would need. That's like the simple answer. Now, if you had 8 teachers, then you would look at that and say, oh, I could reduce. But do you reduce to the 6? Because then you're at your max number. That's dangerous. Again, it goes back to that open enrollment thing I was talking about. You're creating danger in doing that. So, I mean, from that vantage point, I would look at, no, you look at 7. I made that really simple because I was trying to just use a comparison there, although I did my math wrong. So embarrassing. Yes. Yes, the question is, if the district has assets they could sell, could we use that to help reduce our deficit? Yes, we can. But part of the challenge with that, given where we are and the requirements that we have to have a plan that we can actually control. I can't control a property and how much we'll get for it. So is that something we need to consider and we are considering? Yes, because there is property that we could do that with. But the challenge is where we are in the situation we can't enforce that to occur. Like we don't have control over it. Much like I can't say, you know what, state, we're okay because we're going to pass an 11 mil levy and we're going to get the money. Don't worry about it. We can't control that. So I can't put that on a list to say we're going to do it. It's kind of a similar concept to me. Yes. And that's the other problem. Yes. The other problem is it's a one-time thing. And it's great. You know, somebody was talking to me and said, Dan, we just need to get somebody to give us $3 million. And I said, yes, and I will take it. And they can plaster their name on me. I will walk around with it. Very happy to do it. I need them to give us $3 million every year for 10 years. And then after 10 years, I need somebody else to give us $3 million for 10, every 10, like each year of the 10 years. One time is helpful. It's not going to impact it. That 349,000 I talked about, the vast majority of that money was one-time money that we were able to reduce. There's a little bit of it, I think it was around 70,000 that is duplicated. So that helps year over year, but we don't, one time is good, but we need it to be sustainable. Thank you for saying that. Back here first, then up and around. Yes. Yeah, that was a great answer. If we sold the property to a developer and then they developed the houses, then we would get the property taxes from those new houses, which I told you earlier, new housing, we get that increase in property tax. Yes, but that's a few years down the line. Good, absolutely take it, but it's not going to help us in the immediacy. But yes, you're right. And that's part of, as a district, of looking at, and you know, one of the things I enjoy doing is having a multi-year vision. So, you know, I have the 5 and 10-year view because I think it's important that you're not just looking, reminds me of how I was taught to drive. You don't look at the hood of your car, you look down the road. And that to me is the same thing as a district, is you have to be very purposeful in what are your goals, your purpose, and then look strategically ahead, not missing the deer that's jumping out in front of you along the way, but making sure that you're not just solely focused on right in front of you, because that kind of decision is really valuable too. It was here then you, I think, here. No, no staff are part of that 349 that I've talked about. There's no staff tied in there. Are staff retirements for next year factored in anywhere? No. I haven't gotten any official retirement notifications yet. If we do, then those would be considerations to adjust our reductions. Yes. The question was about retirements and are they factored in at all? Yes. The staff, the question was, are the unions open to staff buyouts for older staff? Or shouldn't have said that, more veteran staff, I apologize. And yes, that question was asked of me by a staff member of the union. We've talked about it. I know when the staff asked me in the staff meeting, my answer was, we'll look at anything, we'll consider it, but it's, we have minus $3 million. I don't know how we would come up with a buyout, but there is an algorithm of the positives of a buyout. So that's something that the treasurer and I have talked about within the past week, and he's looking at those different options of how that becomes a positive. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes, sir. So I'll go back to what I said before. I personally would not recommend us trying to pass a levy right now. Is it something that the board and collectively we may consider? Yes, it absolutely is. I believe that a levy passage right now will be incredibly hard. It's hard for me to imagine a levy passing right now. And I would also say, and again, this is all me personally speaking, because a levy decision ultimately is a board decision. So I don't want it to make it seem like I'm making that decision. I'm not. I'm telling you personally, knowing where school levies are throughout the state, knowing what the feeling is from property taxes in the state, and knowing that new funding levies fail dramatically across the state right now, I would not recommend it. I feel like we will lose that. I also would go back to what I said before. I believe that as responsible stewards of taxpayers, we need to make reductions. Is there a point we would come back and talk about a levy? I think that's a fair conversation to have down the line. I don't think it is the appropriate conversation now. But again, that's my personal perspective. How much does it cost to do a levy? I don't know how much it is to put it on the ballot. There's an amount, I just can't remember. But I do know that there is a levy committee and there are funds within that to do that work, which is totally separate from the school district, but there is that as well. Yes.
Good evening, Madison. The library is now closed. Thank you.
So the question was, how many of the extracurricular kinds of things, I think, are not self-funding their expenses? Um, in a knowing the costs of those different extracurriculars, and knowing the amount of money that comes in, less than 10% of extracurriculars are self-funded. And that's not abnormal. Like, by and large, extracurriculars are supplemented by the general fund. Um, so is that something to look at? Yes, that absolutely is something to look at. But I think that becomes part of that challenging question of, again, as an educator, absolutely know there's empirical data that says the more kids that are involved in extracurriculars, the better they do in school. The better human beings they become, the better career opportunities they become. So it's hard to say, well, we're going to change all that. That's hard for me. Not saying it's wrong to consider, it's just hard. But I think it's part of the conversation to look at how much money is raised by these different things, and do we have to change that formula? I think, yes, that has to be, which maybe is your question of, and I'm trying to help ask a question that I would ask too, because you've asked about some of the other things, are we considering, are we looking at pay to participate fees? Absolutely, we have to. They've been stagnant for some period of time, so we have to look at that. Is it the answer? No, but I think it's a thing to examine. It's one of those questions to imagine. Yes. Yes. When you talk about coaching, you're talking about supplementals. Yeah, we can, yeah, so I don't know that off the top of my head, but we can pull the supplemental contracts. I will tell you, I guarantee the question was how much do we pay for coaching supplemental contracts? What I will tell you is it's a large number. I absolutely know it is. I will also tell you that it goes back to what I just said. It is incredibly important to have extracurricular programs for a school district. Kids do better the more they're involved. And then I would also say coaches, when you look at what they are paid for the services they provide and the hours that they work, it's a very small number. I was a baseball coach for a long time in a district, and I know when I figured out the money, it was like back then, it was a while ago, it was like $2 an hour that I made. I didn't do it for the money. The money was a nice thing to have, yes, but I loved coaching. I loved watching kids grow. I loved watching them mature. So we can get that. You can see it. I want to make sure I go back a little bit, kind of back to what I was saying about, I don't want people to also isolate on things that are potential things to think about and answers to this question, but they may not be the singular answer. And it may be that there's a lot of adjustments of a lot of things. Yes. Hmm. 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 Yeah, I like that. That's good. Andrea? Okay. Which I think is a good way of looking at it is, and I also would say that, like, I know because, as a board, we get the donation information and the board votes every month, every board meeting for donations. We are incredibly well supported with donations. Like that is phenomenal. And whether it's, I don't want to say any business because I'm isolating it, but it's a lot of businesses that do a lot of good things for us. And whether it's like the play or with sports, there's an incredible amount of support through that. And it's something I think too, as a district, we always have to be careful we don't go too much to that too, because that can get to be a lot, and that can be a challenge too if we go too much to that angle. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it was, I think I mentioned it earlier. Yes, we are absolutely, and I may not have though too, we are absolutely going to reach out to students for input too. I know at the high school they have an advisory group, which they actually provide a lot of information to the high school leadership team, but we're looking at that opportunity. So, but yes, to students as well, and they're very used to Google Forms and filling them out. So I'm sure they'll do a good job at it. Yeah, but that's part of it is hearing from all the various stakeholders. You know, the staff, the students, the families, the community is really important. Hmm. Yeah, I would tell you the question was, thanks, Joe. The question was, have we looked at other communities that have raised like pay to participate fees and the things they've done to help families with being able to afford that, right? Okay. What I would tell you is, I, by this is always one of my worries. I feel like sometimes if I say something that I don't want people to hold on to and think, oh, they're doing that. I'm not. I'm telling you, there are so many different options to look at, and but I am being forthright. That is something to look at. Have we examined what other districts have done? No, we haven't gone that far down the road on that topic. If that becomes something that we more narrow into as one of the options, then yes, we would look at that as well. I know that we have an incredible amount of families that work bingo to be able to earn money, to be able to pay for fees, which we're incredibly fortunate that we have that. But it would be part of, if that were one of the options, looking at what are some ways that we can help families, because I go back to an earlier comment when we were talking about if we would try to pass a levy. I know that everybody's financially challenged. I mean, it's a uniquely financially difficult time in general. So I think that yes, that would be important to look at if that went down that path, to look at those options too. Yes. Hmm. So the use of buildings and what are our expenses and how are we um, paid for that essentially. Um, so it's something that Andrea and I have been working on, is making sure that we very clearly communicate that with entities and kind of drawing different lines. Bingo is a good example to use. Bingo incredibly gives back to the district. Incredibly gives back to the district. I and it's part of the lines we've drawn. If organizations are using our buildings, but they are this huge sponsor in giving back to the district, there should be some fair exchange. If another group is using it and we incur cost because of it, like a custodian, and they're not providing back to the district, but they're just using the site, which they should do. We want them to use the building. We need to have a fee structure that makes us even. We don't want to lose from it. We just want to be even. We're not trying to make money on it either. We just want to be even. So we're working on that process to make that more absolute, but there are groups that do use buildings and they do pay for the fee to use the building and overtime costs that we have for custodians, which those are the fee is to account for electricity and all that stuff. Other questions? Yes. Yeah, so the question was around the cost to maintain facilities, fields, football stadium, all that stuff. The cost of that, and would we be willing to um, give that caretaking part up to some other organization if they were gonna like get naming rights, essentially? Yeah, yeah. I yeah, I would tell you, we we have done a good job over the years of having a very narrow amount of staff, a limited amount of staff that do a lot of work. We have very limited staff that do facility stuff, and they work their butts off. And we have people that aren't even in the facility realm, and they still work their butt off on facilities because that's just the value of the district and who people are. So our cost to maintain the facilities right now, I would tell you, as doing it internally, is pretty small because we've managed that really well. Uh, would we be willing to do something with naming rights of facilities, which I know had come up at one point? I think about University Hospital or something, and they offered money and we didn't take it. I think that was the thing I heard. That's not true. That did not happen. We would absolutely, Andrea and I can tell you, we've reached out to a number of organizations, larger businesses in this community to talk about a partnership to eventually get to a naming rights conversation, but we just want to talk about a partnership in general. We have not been met thus far with the four, is that right? Four large organizations slash businesses. We have not been met with any positive response. We're going to keep trying. One of the first things I did when I think it was my second interview, I drove around the community and it's so funny. I drove around the community. I thought it's so cool that the library is between the middle school and high school. And I thought it'd be so neat to have like community meetings there. It's so weird. But it, when I drove around, yeah, I was struck by some of our facilities and the upgrades we need, which was part of the charge of the board when they hired me. It was one of the charges is to look for opportunities, much like you were just talking about, of how we could create those types of relationships. I've had that experience in the past. I feel like I know the process. We just haven't found the right willing partners for that yet. Would we be willing? Yes. Much like I said, I will happily wear anybody's t-shirt, hat, or whatever else for naming rights. And I believe wholeheartedly if we had organizations that were willing to partner on some of our facilities like tennis courts, track, yeah, and I can go down the list, but those were the first two. Yes, we would be willing to, or if they would be willing to supplement families to help with pay to participate, I think is where you were going to. Yes, yes, no. Okay, other questions I can answer. Yes. So the question was, if assuming that there are both a north and a south building was the question, and there are repairs needed at north because it is an older building, do we have budget funds to make those repairs? We have a limited capital improvement budget. It's limited. It's not excessive at all. And we don't have the funds to make some of those expensive improvements we have to make. We have a document that lists the facility improvements across the district, whether it's north or the middle school or the high, all of them, and different sports facilities too. We have a list of all of that, and we've tried to quantify the amounts that we have to do for all these things. Part of that idea of looking multiple years in the future, because we can't do all of them at one time. Could we partition them out over time and be strategic? We have to be that way. But we don't have the funds to do it. For example, I just know because I know the document. It's $900,000 to replace the roof at North. We don't have that. It would take us 6 years to come up with that amount of money. And having been on the roof at North, it's not in great shape. So the question was, and I'm going to generalize a little bit. So the question was, does it save us money closing a building? Does it save us money closing a building? Is that good? Okay. If you close a building, yes, there is a savings. You know, you have all your utilities, you have the expenses of maintenance, upgrades. There's a quantifiable amount there. It's different based on building, based on what the cost is. You know, south in the middle school, the cost for the utilities for that is totally different than the high school or north. I mean, they're just older buildings. It's the nature of it. Much like if you live in a decade-old house, it's a lot more expensive typically because it's drafty. I mean, it's just the nature. So it is a quantifiable amount. I can't tell you like the number per building, but each building would be, I'm going to really rough this. Each building is going to be roughly 250,000 plus in savings for the cost to operate the building. That's a very rough number. Yes, sir. Okay. So you're going a path that I'm gonna have to recorrect a little bit. So this is always the danger in these conversations. I don't want there to be some perception. I don't want there to be people leaving this meeting and say, Rambler said, because I did not. And I don't want the rumors to start, because again, I would tell you, we are looking at everything. So are we looking at that too? Of course. I know you are. I just wanted to qualify that answer. If we reduced any of the buildings other than the high school, we couldn't reduce the high school and fit it in the others. If we did any of the other buildings, we could fit the kids in the other buildings. Yes. Yes. Preschool and the admin folks are there. Treasurer, me, student services, assistant superintendent, some storage there too. And then Rabbit Run uses a space. The robotics team now uses a space there as well. Okay. Yes. So the question was, if we were to close a building, would we would we sell the building? That's actually, I have to tell you, you guys have asked such good questions. And I'm like a little bit impressed with myself that like I know these things. It's really cool. So selling a building is not that easy. There are state laws around that. So if a school district is no longer using a school for a school, there's a requirement to first offer it to a community school within that school district. So if we were to not be in a building, by law, you're first required to offer it to a community school. The community school can pay the fair value of it or not. Then you have an option then you could bid it. You could have an auction and bid it out. You have other options at that point. I also know, because I worked in a district where there's an option that is, as opposed to offering it to a community school, this district traded it with the city, and the city gave them things for the building. So we can't just outright sell a building. I was trying to give you the long answer to the short answer. We can't just sell it. I would also tell you, school buildings by and large, they don't sell for a lot of money. Like, typically it's the land that's valuable, not the buildings. And that's just broad speaking. I was in another district and we sold a building. I think it was appraised at like $450,000. We sold it for $100,000, and we were pretty excited to get $100,000 because it was in bad shape. So they typically don't sell for a lot. Yes. So I want to start with the answer of I am really happy to be here. I said it earlier. I'm not going to stop saying this until somebody proves me wrong. It's a really good place. There are really good people here, and it's like you feel it over and over again. A lot of my work in education I did around climate and culture, and I created this whole process. And one of the things I would always say is, I can walk in a building and within a minute, I can tell you what the climate and culture of that building is. I can tell you, is it warm? Is it welcoming? Is it not? Like, I think I was really good at that. And I know when I walk into the community of Madison, the buildings of Madison, McDonald's, Joey's, any place, it feels special to me. It feels special because I'm not here. I haven't been here for 30 years. So it's different. If you've been here a long time, it's just normal. Like, you don't notice that. It's just the norm. But I can tell you, having been in different districts, what I experience here is not what you experience everywhere. And I think that is something that all of you should be very proud of, because it's special. And I think that's unique. Did I know what I was getting into? I believe, although I failed in my math question that I gave myself earlier, I am really good at school financing. I worked with a really good treasurer for a number of years who taught me a lot about school financing, and I have always been very interested in that. So when I was looking at Madison as an opportunity, I read their 5-year forecast. I actually looked at it over 3 years. And back then you did essentially a beginning of the year, end of the year forecast. And the variations between those you can see a lot within that if you know the backgrounds of them. I foresaw the challenges we were going to have. I didn't foresee them as quickly as they came, which again goes back to what I was identifying. Things changed, and they weren't things that were easy to identify, and I consider myself pretty darn good at school financing. I didn't see it. I don't know that the board could have seen that. I don't know that anybody could have anticipated the state was going to change the funding rules. the county commissioners were going to immediately change our funding, that insurance was going to go up the way that it did, and that all of these things were going to come together in this perfect storm. So no, I foresaw that we were going to have to make corrections. I didn't think it was this quickly. But I also would go back to, I believe it's really important for all of you to have a voice and be knowledgeable about it. And I think that we have to do that. I think that that's incumbent upon us. And I think that the more people bring about better ideas. Thank you. I appreciate that very much. I'm very, very thankful to be here, very happy to be here. Thank you for saying that. Yes. Mhm. So the first question is the enrollment, and do we see it plateauing from how the decline has gone? I would tell you that what I would project is that 168, 172 is going to become our normal. I would also tell you it would not surprise me if that dropped a little bit years over years, because, again, the reduction of births in Ohio is dramatic. That was one of the first things I did is I looked at the birth rate in Lake County. It's more dramatic in Lake County. Like there's so many fewer births in Lake County, and that's not, again, it's not Madison, it's Lake County. So that's not going to change. Like, it's not going to dramatically go up. Will it plateau? Yes, it will plateau, but exactly where, I don't know. But so I think that we're close to the plateau. I think that might be a little bit to go. But I think that that's why it's really important that we continue to be very, very attentive to our finances weekly, year over year, so we don't get to a place that we have to make large changes. We have to make minimal course corrections, I think is really important. Your second question was, have we seen an increase of students with disabilities or have exceptional needs, just to generalize a little bit? That's been an increase throughout the United States. Like, there has been an increase of students with different special needs that they have. Yeah. So I would say that it's an interesting thing. The state of Ohio penalizes you if you identify too many kids as disabled. It's a fascinating thing. But because they have an expected number that you have, an expected percentage. And so if it's more than that, they penalize you essentially. But are we seeing more? Yes. I know at times people will say, like, why? I have no idea why. I have no clue why. But I also know that all kids are really important, and kids who have unique challenges are really important. And the value that you see with kids working together, whether they have, this high level of intellect or not, and, the working together with different types of people is such a good value for our kids to learn. I think it's incredibly important. So, yes. The question was, is there a thought of reducing resource officers? That's a commitment the board has made, is having resource officers in all of our buildings. I would tell you that, is it something to consider? Again, yes, it's to consider, but I would tell you that the board is very absolute that that's a absolute answer, that they will have a resource officer in every building. I will also tell you that, having worked in a field where I supervised resource officers in a district, that relationship that kids are able to have with resource officers while I know a lot of times as parents we look at as the safety part of it, which is really important, the relationship that they're able to have is really good. And if anybody is ever interested in looking at, just ask Mr. Nisley if you can come to the high school and see the relationship that the new officer has at that building. He's standing over there. Because it's pretty cool, the relationship and connection, because that's another caring adult that impacts kids that maybe don't get it in different ways. So my shorter answer to that is I don't, even if I were to recommend that, I don't believe the board would support that decision. Okay? And I'm not saying I'm recommending. Other questions I can answer? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No. I think if I remember correctly, Columbus City Schools has like a $1.3 billion budget, if I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure I'm right about that. So I agree with you. This is not unique. I know that, like I said earlier, the state is working, I believe it's 45 districts right now. So this is not unique, but it's unique to us and it's hard to us. And part of the challenge too, I would say, is it's the scale for us. 10% is a large number. And I just want to be upfront. It's a big percentage of our budget, and that's hard. But I agree with you, we're not unique. Columbus is dealing with it. I know a lot of districts are dealing with it. Anything else I can answer? Okay, have a good evening.